What's up, webheads? It's SpideySkeens here with SpideySkeens Cosplay. See what I did there, webheads? Because it's Spider-Man, and you're on the internet, the World Wide Web. Anyway, this week we're going to be making a Spider-Man face shell. Oh my gosh! Something Spider-Man related? Finally, I know. Remember, if you guys like what I'm doing, hit the like button, comment down below if you'd like to see me make anything else, subscribe, and remember, flip that bell.
To start out, I wrapped a styrofoam mannequin head with my Iron Spider face shell that I bought from the store with saran wrap and duct tape. And then I adjusted it a little bit with measurements from my own head. Then I traced that pattern onto 38 6mm EVA foam sheet. I bought this from TNT Cosplay for like $16 for a 6-foot long by 2-foot wide sheet. It's super cost effective, really user friendly. To cut out my pattern, I used an X-Acto knife that I heated up with a heat gun. The reason I did this was because it made cutting through the EVA foam like butter. And that's a bit easier than using a cool X-Acto blade. When cutting out your pattern, there's no reason to move quickly. Just move nice and slow. Take your time. It's not a race. If you move quickly, you're more likely to get a jagged edge, and then your cuts aren't going to line up. And that's going to suck because you're going to have a lot of sanding to do. The next step is to apply contact cement to the edges of our mask. When applying the contact cement to the edges of the mask, you don't want to be overzealous with the contact cement. Otherwise, it is going to gunk up and you are not going to get a nice seam. So I'm using a scrap piece of EVA foam to just spread it along the edges. I like to do 2 layers. I'll do 1 layer first, allow it to dry, and then I'll do a second coat. This just makes sure you get a really good, nice, solid bond. And I'm going to be doing this along all of the edges that are going to be being connected together. Another great reason to apply 2 layers of contact cement to the edge is just in case you missed a spot. If you missed a spot, you're not going to have a clean seam and you're going to have to fill it in. After applying the second layer of contact cement to your edges, you want to allow it 15 minutes or so to dry. If you try to connect the edges together too soon, they are going to tear apart and you're not going to have a good time because your seams will rip. This next step is all about moving slow when attaching the edges. You do not want to rush it. It's not a race. The quicker you move, the more likely you are to make a mistake and have a messed up seam. I can't tell you to take it slow enough because really the main thing you have to worry about is moving slow, because if you move fast, you will mess up. I know I messed up in a couple spots because I tried to be quick. The slower that you move when putting your seams together, the better your seams are going to look. The more likely they are going to line up exactly, and you are going to have to do a lot less sanding that way. Once you have attached all of the pieces of your face shell together and it has begun to take shape, it is time to sand the edges. To start out, I used a Dremel, which I don't necessarily suggest because it eats away the EVA foam really, really quick. So I then switched to a sanding block. This sanding block is 120 grit on one side and 180 on the other side. I used the 120. After I used the 120 grit sanding block to smooth out my seams and get rid of all the unevenness on them, I moved on and started using a 320 grit sanding block to, again, smooth out the seams just a little bit more. It's a finer grit, so it'll do a better job, make it a lot more flush. After you've sanded down your edges, it is time to use Quick Seal or some other kind of caulking to fill in the seams. Just in case there's any kind of small gap, you don't want that to show. Doesn't look too pretty. When applying the quick seal, go ahead and just apply it directly onto the seam. Not a huge amount, just start out with a little bit. You don't need to be overzealous with it. You can always put more on later. When spreading the quick seal across the seam, you can use either old razor blade or you can use your finger. I did both. I started out with a razor blade just because it does a really nice job of making it really, really clean, but it does take a bit longer than just using your finger. I did use my finger to spread the quick seal along the seams a vast majority of the time. I just found it was a bit quicker than using the razor blade. After I had applied quick seal to all of the edges, and I did put it along all of the seams, I then wet my finger with water, just a very, very little bit, and I smoothed out all of the excess quick seal along the edges of the seams, so that way it didn't come out bumpy. After my first layer of quick seal along the seams, I then proceeded to do a second coat, just to be safe. After applying my second layer of quick seal along all of my seams, I then proceeded to smooth out along the edges of those seams again with water. Not a lot of water on my finger, just a very, very little amount to smooth it out. After you've allowed the second layer of quick seal to dry, it's time to put in your breathing holes. To do this, I used a grinding bit on my Dremel. It is a cone shape, and this just worked really nice and super effective. Didn't take a very long time. I definitely suggest putting in more than 12 breathing holes. You could put a hefty amount in. Just makes it easier to breathe, and your lenses are less likely to fog up. Once you've put in your breathing holes, it is then time to put on the Mod Podge. This is just going to make a nice good seal on the foam. The first layer I don't put on really super thick. I just get a nice even coat all the way across. You can always put more on later. When applying the Mod Podge, you don't want to apply it on too heavy because otherwise it'll drip and run, and you want a nice smooth surface, not a bumpy one. After you've applied your first layer of Mod Podge, allow about 20, 25, 30 minutes for it to dry, and then go ahead and apply your second layer. The second layer I like to apply just a little bit heavier, not super heavy where it's dripping because, again, you don't want drip spots. After applying my second layer of Mod Podge and allowing it to dry, I then moved on to applying Plasti Dip to my face shell. The reason being, Plasti Dip just gives it a real nice finish. It'll help bond everything together and just looks good. The reason I did not show myself applying the Plasti Dip is because it was dark outside and the video quality was absolutely terrible and you could not see anything that was going on. My apologies, guys. You are going to want to apply multiple coats of the Plasti Dip. When applying multiple coats, you want to allow 30 to 45 minutes between each coat just so you can allow it to adequately dry. And don't apply too much in one spot at a time because it will bubble. And there you have it, a Spider-Man face shell for a mask with attached lenses. Remember, if you guys like what I'm doing, hit the like button. Comment down below if you'd like to see me make anything else or how you think I could make my videos a little bit better. Subscribe and don't forget to thwip that bell. If you guys haven't yet, go ahead and check out my other videos provided in the links above. Check you next week, webheads.